My husband looked me dead in the eye one Tuesday morning and said, "You have no idea what it costs to keep this house running. You spend like money grows on trees." I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing out my coffee mug before heading to work. I didn't say a word. I just turned off the faucet, dried my hands on the dish towel, and smiled at him. He didn't know what to do with that smile. He never did. His name was Howard. We'd been married 31 years at that point, and I want to be honest with you, there were good years in there. Real good years. When the kids were little, when we were building something together, when he'd reach across the truck seat and squeeze my hand for no reason at all. I'm not here to pretend it was all bad. But somewhere around year 18 or 19, something shifted in him. Or maybe it shifted in me. Maybe I just finally started seeing things clearly. Howard had always been particular about money. That was the polite word for it. Particular. His mother used to say he'd been that way since he was 8 years old, saving every birthday dollar in a shoebox under his bed. I thought it was responsible when we first got married. I thought, good, this man won't gamble away our savings or buy a boat we can't afford. And he didn't. But there's a difference between being careful with money and using money as a weapon, and it took me too long to learn that difference. I worked. I want to make that very clear. I had worked my entire adult life, 26 years as a billing coordinator at a medical group in town. I knew numbers. Lord, I knew numbers better than most. I processed insurance claims and sorted out billing disputes and caught errors that would have cost that practice thousands of dollars. I was good at my job, and I was paid fairly for it. My paycheck went into our joint account every 2 weeks, same as his. But Howard talked about money like it was his. Just his. My mortgage payment, my electric bill. I'm the one keeping the lights on around here, as if my check wasn't sitting in the exact same account funding the exact same expenses. I let it go for years. I told myself it was just the way he talked, not what he meant. I made excuses the way wives do. The way I was raised to do, honestly. My mother had done the same thing with my father and her mother before her. You keep the peace, you don't make a scene, you smooth things over and move on. But it wore on me, quietly, the way a slow drip wears a groove into stone. The worst of it started, I think, the year I got a raise, a significant one actually, about 8%, and instead of being proud, Howard got quiet. Then he got suspicious. He started asking where every dollar went. Not our dollars, my dollars, specifically. He'd look at the bank statements and question purchases I'd made for groceries, for my sister's birthday gift, for a new pair of work shoes. Did you really need that? Couldn't you have found it cheaper? I was 61 years old being asked to justify buying a pair of shoes I needed for work. He started calling it household oversight. Said he just wanted to make sure we were being responsible. But what it really was, and I knew it deep down even when I didn't want to admit it, was control, plain and simple. I started keeping a mental ledger, not out of spite, not yet. Just because something in me needed to know, needed to see it written out clearly. How much did I contribute to this household exactly? Not just in dollars, but in everything else. The grocery runs, the doctor appointments I scheduled for both of us, the insurance paperwork I handled because I understood it and he didn't want to bother, the cooking, the cleaning, the remembering, the invisible work that holds a house together. It added up. Lord, it added up. The breaking point, or at least the first real crack, came the March before last, Howard's 60th birthday. He'd been talking about it for months. His milestone birthday, he called it. Said he wanted to do something big, something memorable. I thought he meant the two of us, maybe a nice dinner, maybe a weekend trip to Asheville like we'd always talked about. I'd been putting a little money aside for that purpose. Instead, he announced, not asked, that he was going to invite his whole family. His brother and sister-in-law from Greensboro, his sister's family from Charlotte, his cousin who drove up from Georgia every year for the holidays, 3 of his old college friends who'd started some group chat together during the pandemic, and his mother. His mother who, bless her heart, had never once in 31 years said a kind word to me that didn't have a backhanded qualifier attached to it. In total, 17 people. I want a real party, he told me. Home-cooked. None of this catered stuff. People want real food, Kathleen. Your brisket, your potato salad, your peach cobbler. You know how to do this. I'll handle the drinks. He'll handle the drinks. He said that like it was an equal contribution. Like buying 2 cases of beer and a bottle of bourbon was comparable to cooking for 17 people in our kitchen. I looked at him for a long moment. When did you plan this? Just now, telling you, Howard. That's 6 weeks away. I need to know numbers. I need to shop. You've done bigger church potlucks than this. You'll be fine. And there it was. That's how he did it. He'd frame it as a compliment. You're so capable. You're so good at this. In a way that left me no room to say no without seeming like I was being difficult. I'd been outmaneuvered by that move for 30 years. I said, all right. He looked surprised. He'd been braced for pushback. All right, I said again. And I smiled at him, that same smile from the kitchen sink. He went into the living room to watch television, and I sat down at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pen, and I started making lists. 2 kinds of lists. The first list was the party planning list. Brisket for 17 meant I'd need a full packer brisket, at least 12 pounds, plus a second smaller one for the people who didn't eat beef. His sister had gone pescatarian, I remembered, so I'd need something else for her. His mother was watching her sodium. One of his college friends was diabetic and had mentioned it at Christmas. I wrote all of this down. The second list was different. I'd been doing my research quietly over the past several months. I knew what things cost. Not just what Howard thought things cost, but the actual market rate. Catering companies in our area charged between $45 and $70 per person for a full meal service. Personal chefs ran anywhere from $50 to $150 an hour. Event setup and breakdown, dishwashing, shopping, and meal prep, it all had a dollar amount attached to it if you hired it out. I had never hired it out. For 31 years, I had simply done it. I did the math for the party. Conservative estimates, nothing fancy. The shopping alone, brisket, sides, desserts, all the supplies, came to just over $400 in groceries. The labor, priced at the low end of what a personal chef in our county charged, was another $600. I added a modest fee for event coordination, which is what I was doing every time I figured out the seating and the timeline and made sure his cousin's dietary thing didn't conflict with the menu. Total, a little over $1,100. For one party, I didn't say anything yet. I just kept my list and I kept smiling. The 6 weeks went by the way those kinds of weeks always do, in a blur of errands and early mornings and more work than anyone saw. I ordered the brisket from the butcher shop on Route 9 because their quality is better than the grocery store, and I wanted this to be done right. I made my potato salad from scratch the real way with the celery and the pickle relish and the hard-boiled eggs I'd been perfecting since I was 19 years old. I baked 3 peach cobblers. I made a pan of vegetable lasagna for his sister. I had a fresh fruit platter for his diabetic friend, clearly labeled with a little card because I'm not going to let a man have a health crisis at my kitchen table. Howard picked up the drinks on Friday afternoon. He made a point of telling me what they cost. $63. The party was on a Saturday. People started arriving around noon. His mother walked in first, which was somehow both surprising and completely predictable, and she looked around the kitchen with that expression she'd been wearing since 1994. The one that said she was tolerating all of this. She hugged Howard like he'd just returned from war and gave me a nod. "Something smells good," she said. "Not you've worked hard or thank you for having us. Just that the something smelled good acknowledgement that technically couldn't be argued with." By 12:30, the house was full. People were laughing. Howard was pouring drinks and holding court in the living room. I was in the kitchen, plating things, refilling things, keeping track of who needed what. His brother came in once to say the brisket was the best he'd ever had. I thanked him. Howard came in once to ask if there were more napkins. That was it. Once. To ask about napkins. I found the napkins. I also found, somewhere in that moment between the oven and the paper towel drawer, a kind of calm that surprised me. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past angry. I was just clear. The way you get clear when you've been making a decision for a long time without knowing it. Dinner was served at 2 o'clock. Everyone sat down. Everyone ate. Everyone said the right things. His mother had seconds of the potato salad, which I noted because she hadn't complimented me on anything in 3 decades. His sister hugged me in the kitchen and said, "I don't know how you do it, Kathleen, honestly." And I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to keep doing it. After dessert, when people were sitting around with their coffee and Howard was feeling magnanimous the way men do after a good meal and a few drinks, he stood up and made a little toast, thanked everyone for coming, said it had been a wonderful day, raised his glass to the good life. He did not mention me. Not a word. Not a Kathleen put all this together, or we couldn't have done this without her, or even just my name. He thanked his buddy for driving up from Raleigh. He thanked his brother for bringing the extra folding chairs. He did not say my name once. I smiled and refilled the coffee and let it sit. The guests left around 5. I cleaned up the kitchen, alone, since Howard's back was bothering him, apparently, and when everything was put away and the house was quiet, I went to the little desk in the back bedroom where I kept my personal files. I took out the list I'd been keeping since the beginning. The full accounting. I added the groceries I'd just spent, $412 to be precise. I added my labor hours for the party itself, including prep the day before, 11 hours total. I calculated it at $60 per hour, which was below market rate for our area. I added the coordination, the dietary accommodations, the menu planning. Then I went back further. I did something I hadn't let myself do in years. I pulled out 6 months of bank statements. I started going through every transaction, every grocery run, every household supply purchase, every prescription I'd picked up for both of us, every birthday card I'd bought for one of his relatives, every household repair I'd scheduled and supervised. I categorized them. I tallied them. I cross-referenced them with his contributions over the same period, his direct deposits, his specific charges, what he'd paid for, and what I'd covered. It took me until almost midnight to finish. Howard fell asleep on the couch around 9 and I let him. When I was done, I had a clear picture. Not a perfect one. There's no truly fair way to divide a marriage up into a spreadsheet, but a clear one. And what it showed me was something I had known in my bones for years, but had never let myself see in black and white. I was carrying roughly 63% of the household financial burden, not counting labor, with labor factored in, based on fair market estimates for cooking, cleaning, scheduling, caregiving support, and household management. I was closer to 72%. Howard believed he was keeping the lights on. The lights hadn't needed keeping on. They'd been on the whole time. I didn't say anything to him that night. I let him sleep on the couch, which he did occasionally when he dozed off watching television. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house that I had decorated and maintained and cleaned and made a home, and I thought about what I wanted. That was new. Thinking about what I wanted, not what would keep the peace, not what would make things easier. What I, Kathleen, actually wanted. I thought about my sister, who'd gone through something similar 20 years ago, and finally made a change and never looked back. I thought about my friend from work who'd kept quiet for too long too, until her health started suffering from the stress of it. I thought about the version of myself at 32, coming home exhausted from work and still cooking dinner, and what I would say to her now. I thought about the toast he'd given, the way my name hadn't been in it. On Sunday morning, Howard came into the kitchen while I was making eggs and said, "Good party yesterday." It was. I agreed. "You done good," he said, which was his version of a compliment. High praise, really, from Howard. I turned the burner down and turned to face him. "I've been thinking," I said, "that we should talk about how we handle household finances going forward." He looked wary immediately. That was telling. "I put together a little accounting," I said. "From the last 6 months. I think you'll find it interesting." I had printed it out. 2 pages, clean and clear, the way I'd been doing billing summaries for 26 years. I set it on the kitchen table. He didn't pick it up right away. He poured himself a cup of coffee first, which was his way of buying time. Then he read it. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "This doesn't seem right. The numbers are accurate," I said. I double-checked everything against the statements. I'm not saying the numbers are wrong, as I'm saying this doesn't account for." He stopped. I pay the mortgage. You pay half the mortgage, I said. The payment is $1,700. Your half is $850. My half is $850. I've been paying my half every month, Howard. It comes out of the same joint account we both put money into. You're not paying more of the mortgage than I am. He opened his mouth and closed it again. I also wanted to show you the party estimate, I said, and I turned to the second page. For what yesterday cost if we'd hired it out. I priced it conservatively. He looked at the number. His jaw shifted in that way it did when he was trying to figure out how to argue with something he couldn't actually argue with. I'm not saying you owe me that money, I said. I'm saying I want you to understand what I contribute, because I don't think you've known. And I think that's why you talk about it the way you do. Like it's yours. Like I'm spending what belongs to you. But Howard, I have been funding and running this household for 31 years, and I have never once heard you acknowledge that. The kitchen was very quiet. That toast yesterday, I said. You thanked your brother for the folding chairs. He looked at the table. I don't want to fight, I told him. I'm 62 years old and I am tired of fighting, and I am tired of being invisible in my own home. What I want is to sit down together like the partners we were supposed to be and figure out what's fair. Really fair. Not who controls what, but what actually makes sense for two people who've spent 31 years building something together. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought he was going to push back, get defensive, leave the room. Howard's default setting was to withdraw when he felt cornered. But he didn't. I didn't realize, he finally said, that you were keeping track. I shouldn't have needed to, I said. He nodded, slowly. In that way of his, that meant he was actually hearing something, not just waiting for his turn to speak. The birthday party, he said. I didn't, he stopped. I should have said something. When I toasted, yeah, I said. You should have. We sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours that Sunday morning. The eggs I'd made got cold and neither of us ate them, and I reheated mine in the microwave later. We talked, really talked, the way we hadn't done in I don't know how long. It was uncomfortable. It was necessary. There were moments where I thought he was going to shut down and moments where I felt my own throat get tight. But we stayed at the table. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I've thought about it a lot, and I know there are people who will have opinions about it. We didn't fix everything that Sunday. That would be a nice story, but it's not the true one. There were more conversations after that, some of them hard, some of them harder. We saw a counselor for a while, a woman named Dr. Bridges, whom I liked immediately and Howard tolerated and eventually came to respect. Some things changed. He started saying my name when he talked about the house, the food, the things I did. Small thing, significant thing. He started asking what I needed, not just what needed doing. He stopped referring to the money as his. Some things didn't change as fast as I wanted them to. I'll tell you what I know for certain. I am 62 years old, and I spent too many of those years making myself smaller than I was, carrying more than was fair and not saying so, keeping the peace at the cost of my own peace. I still make the brisket. I still make the potato salad and the peach cobbler and the things I make because I am genuinely good at them and I take pride in that. But I make them because I choose to, not because I've been managed into it. That's the difference. And it took me a long time to find it. My daughter called me a few months after that Sunday morning. She's sharp as a tack. My daughter always has been. She said, "Mom, you seem different. Good different." I just got tired of smiling at things I should have been saying out loud, I told her. She laughed. Then she said, "It's about time." She wasn't wrong.